Hearing. I'm David Ingram. We're talking on Ingram around the world. Usually you can find us at www.david-ingram.com. Lots of archives, lots of good things to see there. For this segment, though, it's David Ingram, my guest Murray Morrison, and Cheryl Nickel. And we're talking about credit and that kind of thing. And Cheryl, you just mentioned helping out elders and examining this and so on. For 12, 14 years, I should figure out how long, I used to travel with a lady named Beth Chapman. And she wrote a little pamphlet, and you might want to think about this pamphlet as well. She's died just last summer, and about 92 or 93 years old. And her pamphlet was a 8.5 by 14 piece of paper that folded up into four, making a little pamphlet. And it had a place to list where the will was, where the safety deposit box was, all the things of the family. And we did, you'll find this hard, we did, I'm sure, well over 2,500 seminars. I used to be doing sometimes 2 a day, 1 a day. It was my volunteer thing. I had 700 tax offices, and I used to travel around, and we did them in Syracuse, New York, and Whitehorse in the Yukon, and Dawson City, and anywhere you could find 15 women together that wanted. And sometimes we'd have 600 people show up. But I'm talking back in 66, 67, 68, right up until the 80s. And it's hard to remember, Murray, you may not think of this, but we would be in a place like Whitehorse. There would be 600 women. There's a population of 10,000. There'd be 600 women there at the school gymnasium for one of our things. And you'd ask, how many of you have a bank account? And maybe 25 women would put up their hands. In 66, 67, 68, women didn't have their own bank accounts. If they were a married woman, the husband had all that stuff. And half the time they didn't have a driver's license. They didn't. And we did seminars. And this is a hint for you, because you can do this, and what you're talking about. The seminar, I would be there as the tax. I could take anybody's position because I'd done so many. But what we tried to do, I was always the tax man. What we tried to do is we tried to get a funeral director.
You have that?
And the funeral director in Whitehorse was the funniest guy I ever saw.
I was raised in Whitehorse, just so you know.
You were raised in Whitehorse?
I was raised in Whitehorse, although 66 was after my time.
Really?
And then back then, the funeral director, who's not the same one, used to leave people in his back porch in the winter.
Well,
until burial time came along.
Oh, that's because it was too cold.
And that's the kind of stuff I was talking about. The funeral director in Whitehorse was so much fun. Anyway, and he did a long dissertation about one time about how much it cost for a funeral, and how you had to take the cost, and he sort of listed out the cost of everything and all the stuff there, and then you divided it, and that's how much you needed for a funeral. And I said, you mean if you only get one funeral this year, it's going to cost $63,000 or something? And anyway, make a long story short. But it was 66, the start of Canada Pension Plan. So we had a representative from the Canadian government, Canada Pension Plan. We would have a local lawyer who would talk about wills and this type of thing. We'd have a bank manager, because women had never met a banker. Most of them had never been inside a bank. And even still in 66, it's hard to believe. At that time, for instance, in Canada, there was only 4 business and professional women's clubs in Canada. There was one in Winnipeg, Edmonton, Toronto, and Vancouver. And I mean, women, and that's how I got my start, was traveling with this lady, completely do-gooder. We paid our own transportation and all the rest of the stuff. And don't ask me why I did it, except I could do it because I had offices all over the place. And it was an education that I will still always remember. And almost everybody that would have gone to those things now will be dead at this point, or they're 93 years old. But one lady was here the other day who's 84 years old, and she is, I will tell you off the air, I won't tell you here. But she was the lady that was at one of those things, and she remembered them, and she went on to do something else, which I'll tell you about afterwards. But you can have so much, you can do so much lasting good with that kind of thing. And that's what we did. We did them in church basements. We did them.
That's the plan.
Just about everywhere. We used to do them in the secondary schools, Queen Elizabeth Secondary and U.S. Secondary, and
Yeah.
all around the place we would do it, and if we went to we go to the school boards, and the school boards would put it in their calendar.
Understood.
Okay.
That's kind of our plan, and churches will
And
allow
I
their
got it all
basements
set
to
up.
be used and so on.
We should deck you out a hearse so that you can go. This can be your traveling car, right? Because you can carry all sorts of equipment and stuff and business cards. Have a good selection of business cards and.
You won't forget the business cards if there's a hearse.
Never again.
No, exactly.
Never again.
Exactly.
Well, people are dying to get in them, as you know.
Please.
Murray Morrison. Let's talk about privileged communication.
Okay.
Where does privileged communication start and where does it stop?
Oh boy.
If I ask you, if I do this and this and murder my wife, and I'm thinking of killing my wife, what if I do this and this? Is that privileged communication?
I hate that question. If I know a crime is about to be committed, my understanding is that I'm duty-bound to report it.
That's my understanding, too.
However, if you come to me and say, Murray, I've murdered my wife 2 years ago.
And buried her in the
And that's happened to me 3 times in 30 years.
Really?
Yeah. So Law Society, stay away from me. Then my understanding is that's a privileged communication because there's nothing I can do to prevent it.
You can't stop it.
No. So that's a privileged communication. Privilege is communications made between a client and his or her lawyer in contemplation of litigation. In other words, you can't come and say, well, I want you to write a contract and then get in a fight and say, Murray, you can't give evidence because it was a privileged communication unless there was an aspect where there could have been, might have been, a court aspect. And, privilege is about communication that has some bit, as I understand it, of litigation bent.
So, privileged communication doesn't exist if it's contemplating a crime.
That's my understanding. This doesn't crop up every day. A lot of times I get clients saying, you can't talk about what we're talking about here, can you? And I say, as long as you're not plotting a crime, no, I can't. But yeah, your understanding, as I understand it, is correct. There's books on the stuff. It's pretty arcane stuff. There's books on it. My understanding also is if there's a terrorist implication, that can overcome it. And we don't get to decide whether you're a terrorist or
Well,
I am.
I think the pornography thing, the child pornography's beat that too now somehow or other. But maybe not here, maybe just in some states. I know there.
I think it's beat it in some states.
Yeah.
And if you came to me again and said, I plan to download what's going to be a crime in, for example, Thailand or one of those countries, then we don't have a privilege because you're contemplating collecting child pornography.
Yeah.
So.
Okay. Now,